Welcome to What the F Happened, Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast where we break down what's actually happening across fraud, scams, AML, and financial crime.
Each episode cuts through the noise to explain the tactics, trends, and real-world impact behind the headlines, so you're better prepared for what comes next. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Deep Dive. You know, when it comes to financial crime defense, the landscape, it isn't just shifting anymore. It's experiencing what I can only call a full-on regulatory-driven technological revolution. We're really moving away from that old mindset of just, accepting loss prevention. We're moving toward a proactive and mandatory real-time defense strategy. So today, we've taken a deep breath and plunged into a whole stack of specialized sources. We're talking research reports, technical analyses, all detailing these critical fraud trends and, crucially, the binding regulatory deadlines that are taking effect in early 2026. Our mission is to give you a shortcut, really, to understanding the three big imperatives facing financial institutions right now. First, these dramatic new liability rules for how money moves. Second, the new attack surfaces that open banking introduces. And third, how AI-driven platforms are being used for defense, turning risk management from a cost center into, well, a potential source of revenue.
It really is an inflection point, absolutely. Yeah. What's genuinely fascinating here is just how quickly the whole operational conversation has changed. It's no longer about if you need better defenses.
Right.
It's about how fast you can modernize your core systems to meet all these challenges at once. We saw this captured perfectly by DataVisor's COO, Tony Q. He basically said, the more proactive we can become, the better protected institutions and their members will be. That's where fraud prevention is headed.
So proactivity isn't just a best practice.
Not anymore. And now it's a regulatory necessity that, it starts this quarter.
Okay, let's start with the biggest one then. The regulatory tidal wave impacting money movement. The new rules from Nacha governing the ACH network were already in January 2026, and the compliance deadline for this new framework is March 20th. That means implementation needs to be finalized right now.
This is the tectonic shift you mentioned. It really is. For years, ACH fraud detection focused, almost entirely on unauthorized debit.
Someone pulling money out of your account without permission.
Exactly. That was the standard threat model. The game changer is that the liability rules now explicitly expand to include credit push fraud.
So credit push, just to be clear, that means the user, or I guess in a lot of these cases, the business, they're the ones actually initiating the transfer.
Precisely.
But they've been tricked into doing it.
Tricked is the right word. We're talking specifically about these really sophisticated social engineering schemes, things like business email compromise, BEC, where a CFO is impersonated,
right,
or these elaborate vendor impersonation schemes where someone changes the bank account on file. The funds were authorized by the account holder, but under fraudulent pretenses.
And that's so much harder to detect than just a simple unauthorized debit.
Oh, much harder.
And the regulatory consequence now is that the liability for catching the scam shifts from the receiving bank to the sender.
It does.
That completely flips the traditional fraud defense model.
It absolutely does.
Here.
The responsibility for detection moves squarely to the center, so the ODFIs, the originating depository financial institutions, and other big non-consumer originators. And this is significant because traditionally, the ODFI just saw its job as verifying the originator's intent, not necessarily the legitimacy of the account on the other end.
But now they have to.
Now they must implement these robust, risk-based controls. They have to monitor ACH files and batches in real time or something very close to it before that money leaves their institution. The mandate is basically forcing them to build these sophisticated behavioral and identity models that, honestly, they just didn't need before for ACH.
That feels like a provocative alignment. If the U.S. is pushing sender-side accountability, how does this actually compare globally? Is this an alignment, or are we just playing catch-up?
It's definitely an alignment, but yeah, maybe playing catch-up in a sense. This change in the U.S. explicitly mirrors the shift toward what's called authorized push payment, or APP, fraud trends. We've been seeing this in the UK and the EU for several years now. When APP fraud exploded over there, regulators moved quickly. They mandated that the responsibility, the due diligence, had to fall on the institution that was initiating the push payment. So this is a very clear signal. Sender-side accountability for stopping fraudulent money movement is, it's quickly becoming the global standard. If you're a global FI, you already know this standard. Now, U.S. domestic payments have to conform.
Okay. So Nacha is demanding accountability for the money leaving the system. At the same time, the CFPB is demanding accountability for the data that's fueling that movement. Let's get into the other huge shift that kicked off this January. The CFPB's open banking rule, Section 633.
Right. This rule is the official catalyst. It's what's modernizing secure data access across the whole U.S. financial ecosystem. And we know the deadline structure, the large banks.
Those with over $250 billion in assets.
That's them. They have to comply by April 2026. The mandate requires them to provide secure API access to consumer financial data whenever the consumer authorizes it.
And this isn't just a new rule, it's a technical mandate for transformation, right? What older methods are these APIs replacing?
They're explicitly replacing traditional screen scraping. For years, third-party apps, budgeting tools, financial advisors, they would log in using a consumer's own credentials and just scrape the data off the website interface.
Which sounds so clunky and insecure.
It was, and it gave the third party way too much access. The CFPB rule mandates standardized API interfaces that only allow secure transmission of very specific data points. It standardizes the process, it improves security, and it's going to dramatically accelerate U.S. open banking adoption.
But with all accelerated innovation, it opens up new attack surfaces. It has to.
Which brings us right to the next phase of this deep dive. The new fraud vectors. I mean, the speed and convenience of these APIs are great for innovation, but they have to be just incredibly tempting targets for organized crime. They're a massive target, yes. Our sources are really clear on this. While the standardized APIs enable secure data movement, that standardization itself can be exploited. We're talking sophisticated, high-velocity attacks, synthetic identity fraud, account takeover, especially if the API controls are weak.
It's an inherent side effect, then.
It is. If you build a faster, standardized door, well, sophisticated criminals will find a way to test the lock on that door faster.
So if open banking means thousands of third parties might need real-time data access through an API, how do fraud teams make sure the entity making that request is the real account holder, and not some attacker using a cleverly crafted synthetic ID that passes the basic checks? This seems like the core conflict between compliance and security.
And this is where the concept of identity orchestration becomes, well, not just important, but absolutely fundamental. It has to be the top priority for these teams after the CFPB deadlines. Identity orchestration is the discipline of validating the real person behind any request, an API pull, an account opening, a payment, without adding a bunch of friction for legitimate users.
Can you break that down? What does that orchestration look like in practice? What pieces are being orchestrated?
Think of it like a dynamic security assembly line. So instead of relying on one single check, like just a password or an IP address, orchestration dynamically links multiple signals in real time. Things like device intelligence, geolocation, behavioral biometrics, and the transaction context itself. For example, if an API request comes from a device that normally logs in from California, but maybe the behavioral patterns look unusual and the IP is masked, the orchestration layer automatically triggers a high-friction challenge. The goal is to enforce the security the CFPB rules require, while making sure that 99% of legitimate users have a completely seamless experience. That balancing act is the core challenge.
That transition from regulatory pressure and new risks, it brings us right to the technological response that's needed. We're talking about unifying fraud and anti-money laundering into what the industry now calls FRAML, empowering it with real-time AI.
Exactly. We have to stop thinking of fraud and AML as these separate siloed cost centers. Historically, they were separate because, well, fraud was a fast retail problem and AML was a slow regulatory compliance problem.
But the data they use is largely the same.
It's largely the same. Customer entity, transaction flow, network relationships. Unifying them is how leaders are going to move faster, operate more efficiently, and crucially, operationalize their defense for growth.
That idea of turning risk into revenue sounds a little counterintuitive, but the case study we looked at on the payments processor illustrates this perfectly. They modernized their whole risk operation using this real-time FRAML decisioning. What were the tangible results?
The results were truly transformational. They really show the power of operationalizing defense. This payments processor, they achieved a 35% reduction in fraud losses.
Which is huge.
It's substantial. And they did that all while scaling to support over 60 million monthly transactions. So they didn't just save money, they stabilized their whole platform to handle immense growth without buckling under the risk.
But when you're dealing with that kind of volume, that kind of real-time attack, the speed of your strategy updates is just vital. You can't wait 3 weeks for an IT cycle if an attack pattern changes.
Exactly, and that's where the tech really shone. They achieved this massive leap in agility. Their fraud strategy updates became 98% faster.
90%.
98%. And they did this by using ensemble machine learning and, this is key, no and low-code platforms. I mean, 98% faster is the difference between updating your defense system in an afternoon versus running a 3-month waterfall project. It means you can react to a new attack vector launched by a criminal's AI in real time. That's the definition of proactive defense.
Okay, let's pivot back to that idea of turning risk into revenue. How did this processor actually convert their internal defense system into an external product?
It all came down to architecture. Specifically, building the Framel platform with multi-tenancy in mind from day one.
Meaning it can host multiple clients at once.
Right. It can securely host and manage risk ops for multiple separate clients simultaneously. And because their system was so agile and so robust, they were able to quickly white-label their fraud and AML offering. Our sources note they scaled up to over 40 subtenants in a single day.
Wow.
This is the ultimate competitive advantage. They took their core operational expense risk management and packaged it as a marketable product. They created a powerful new revenue stream.
That really is the power of unified real-time Framel in action. But even the best AI needs human oversight. When you're managing 60 million transactions a month, investigators can get overwhelmed by alerts. So we need to talk about the tech that makes the human investigator faster. AI Alert Summary.
This is direct answer to investigator burnout and inefficiency. I mean, managing thousands of high-velocity alerts every day is just overwhelming if the investigator has to manually pull data from 4 different systems just to understand the context. The solution being deployed now is this AI Alert Summary button. An investigator just clicks it, and the AI instantly synthesizes all the associated data into one digestible window.
What specifically is in that automated summary that wasn't immediately available before?
Well, before, an investigator might open an alert and just see a rule trigger.
Yeah.
Then they'd have to manually check case management history, look up the entity's behavioral score, review notes from previous reviews.
All that legwork.
All that legwork. The AI summary eliminates it. It delivers comprehensive context. The precise reason the alert was triggered, all the key risk indicators highlighted, and it pulls data from every silo rules, review history, investigator notes, entity details.
So the benefit isn't just about being faster, it's about context and the quality of the decision.
Absolutely. The practical impact is huge. It drastically cuts the time needed to understand the core issue, which boosts investigator efficiency by a massive margin. But more importantly, because it instantly delivers that history and specific risk indicators, it leads to much more informed and accurate decisions. You're not just making them faster, you're making them with 100% of the relevant data right there.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Moving from traditional payment rails and AI, let's look forward to the next frontier. The challenges and opportunities with emerging payment methods, specifically stablecoins.
Right. Stablecoins and digital assets are often seen by legacy fraud teams as a kind of financial crime blind spot, a place where illicit activity can hide because of this perceived anonymity.
But our source material makes this really fascinating, counterintuitive claim that stablecoins, even though they operate on decentralized ledgers, might actually be easier to monitor than cash or even traditional wires. Why is that?
It all comes down to on-chain visibility. When you send a wire, your bank sees your ID and the other person's ID, but the underlying history of those funds is totally opaque. With stablecoin transactions, because they happen on public immutable blockchains, that on-chain visibility is permanent. And when you pair that data with modern analytics platforms, fraud and AML teams can detect risk earlier and trace illicit activity way faster.
So the very transparency of the blockchain, which can feel really intimidating and technical, is actually a defensive advantage over these opaque traditional banking rails.
Precisely. The transparency of on-chain data can reveal entire patterns of activity while it's interacting, the velocity of transfers, network size, things that are simply invisible in traditional rails like card or ACH. And what the sources show is that where fraud still succeeds in the crypto space, it's usually exploiting operational gaps at the on-ramps and the off-ramps.
Like at exchanges.
Exactly. Gaps in KYC at exchanges, not the anonymity of the tech itself. So the core defense relies on knowing how to use those crypto-native signals to strengthen your overall defense strategy as stablecoin usage expands. You're turning decentralization into a defensive edge.
That shifts the focus dramatically. The threat isn't the technology's inherent risk, it's the organization's preparation, its capacity to integrate those crypto-native signals into their existing FRAML platform. This has been a whirlwind of a deep dive into 2026. We've really covered the three pillars that have to be addressed: the dramatic regulatory shift towards sender accountability with Nacha, the mandatory secure data sharing via the CFPB, and the resulting need for sophisticated identity orchestration. And, of course, the essential tech solution of unifying fraud and AML with real-time AI.
The summary is really unequivocal. The defense game for the next few years is all about speed, unification, and real-time decisioning. AI isn't an optional add-on anymore. It's becoming the core engine for detection, for supporting high-velocity payments, and for driving the adoption of these unified fraud plus AML platforms. If you aren't moving toward real-time decisioning and unification, you are falling behind.
It really seems like that unified FRAML platform is quickly becoming the new industry standard for efficiency and, frankly, for a competitive advantage.
It is. So here is the final thought for you to consider, and this pulls from the broader challenges outlined in the 2026 Fraud Trends research. If unified fraud and AML is now the standard for operating efficiently at scale, how prepared are your current systems, your processes, and your people to face the 5 specific operational challenges that teams confront when they try to genuinely operationalize AI at scale?
It's not just about buying the AI models.
Not at all.
No.
It's about having the governance, the data infrastructure, the investigator training, and that low-code agility you need to make that technology a revenue-generating reality within your existing complex framework. That operational hurdle, that's often the silent killer of even the best modernization efforts.
You've been listening to What the F Happened? Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast by DataVisor.
This episode's audio was generated using Google's Notebook LM based on expert analysis and trusted sources. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.